So I'm going to talk about faith and wisdom. I'll just say a little bit about the five spiritual faculties, sort of following on a bit from what Sad and Andy said. I know it was clever. I haven't got any notes at the moment. I'm seeing how far I can go without grabbing my notes. I don't usually do it like this. So the five spiritual faculties, I really like the five spiritual faculties because I think it's because I'm a bit visually minded and they work to me visually sort of together. So you've got mindfulness in the middle, faith, wisdom, as you're looking at it, vigour and meditation. And I really love how they all connect with each other. There's so many really beautiful, interesting, subtle, obvious lines of connection between all the five, not just between the ones that appear to need sort of balancing. And I sort of see them as a bit as a mandala. They feel like a mandala and a sort of a sacred space even. I kind of see them a little bit like a garden. It feels like they're sort of laid out like to me like a garden. It's like similarly with a mandala, it's like whatever point you enter, you can smell the flowers of, for example, faith, but you've got the aroma of vigour, you've got the aroma of like meditation, mindfulness, you can smell the sort of wisdom coming out, and you can see those other flowers as well, and those other bits of the sort of little landscape there. So I really like that they all sort of, work with each other. But I'm glad Sad and Andy said the little thing last night about balancing, because I just thought it was a bit daft, this whole thing of balancing them all. It's like, what the hell does that look like? But the sense that, if you're going for refuge, you couldn't just practice faith with it and miss the others out, because that you just wouldn't really be going for refuge. Right, leave my notes here. That didn't last very long, did it? So that's my sugar alarm. It's all good, don't worry. Collapse in front of you all. So what was I talking about? What was that all about? There's a point I was on the edge of. Oh yeah, that was it. If you just can't engage with practice. You just can't deepen your practice if you're just going with one of them alone. You wouldn't do anyway. It's not like you couldn't just engage with vigour only. You just couldn't do that. So they actually naturally balance each other. But I think the sense is more of the balancing. It's more like you're just making sure the other ones are feeding in. So everyone's going to have a propensity for one of them. You will all have a natural propensity to one of the five. It's just the way you're made up, which is good. That'll be a strength. That could be your leading faculty in a way. But you've just got to make sure that you're not letting the other ones fall away. But particularly, you're not letting the ones fall away that are weaker. So if if you really struggle with meditation, don't just try and go, oh, well, I'll just rely on faith and whatever it is. So it's just trying to make sure that we're letting the other ones sort of come in enough, and that for example, I'll go into it in a bit. For example, for faith to blossom as faith, it needs vigour, it needs wisdom, it needs mindfulness, and it needs the other one, whichever one that is, I've missed out. What is it? Wisdom. Thank you. So so that's just a little bit on the five and this whole thing about balancing. So in Bante's little piece called The Way to Wisdom, which is where he talks about the five spiritual faculties. So he talks about them as sort of as kind of governing principles in one's life. And he talks about, in a way, there's a sort of correlation with the five sense faculties in the mundane world being, in a way, similar to as we progress and as we work in the spiritual field, so to speak. It's the five spiritual faculties are what we rely on. So with the mundane, the five sense faculties are in a way, if we're not going for refuge there, those faculties are what ignorance, craving and hatred will attach itself to and work through our sense contact, and then we a lot of the time negotiate those through the lenses of the sort of poisons in a way, whereas from the point of the sort of transcendental, what would be present would be, obviously there'll be a lack of the three poisons. The sense factors will still be there, but they'll be absolutely completely saturated with the five spiritual faculties in a way. Okay. Righty-ho, that's by way of intro. So I'll go into wisdom, and then I will go into faith, and then I'll come back to wisdom and mention faith again. All right? So but again, Banting this little thing on the way to wisdom, he says, which I think this is a just for those, if I'm using the word Bante, it's Sangharakshita I'm referring to. It's a sort of reverential term for Sangharakshita. So, but Sangharakshita says that seeing things as they, so the idea is that we're trying to see things as they really are. That's what we're sort of doing in terms of moving towards enlightenment. And Bante says that. I always do this in talks. I end up talking about 3 minutes ahead of what's actually written on the piece of paper, then I get confused. So to see things as they really are is to see the impermanent as impermanent, to see the unconditioned as the unconditioned, and to see that, that we can't get lasting happiness from the impermanent, basically. That's one way of looking at it. So Bante says, the idea is that we're trying to seeing things as they really are, not as they appear to be. Okay, so that for me is a lovely little sort of Sangharakshita thing, that thing of not as they appear to be. So he's very clever with his words, Sangharakshita. So as we're not enlightened, we don't see things as they really are. So we haven't got a true sort of understanding of the nature of reality. And we see things through a particular lens. But the lenses that we're looking through, we don't even quite recognise that we're not seeing things. We're just seeing things as they appear to be, not as they are in truth, in reality, if that makes sense. So I just thought this was really interesting, the fact that that we're just assuming that we're seeing things, so to speak, sort of truthfully, and there's this whole thing of it's my truth and stuff, which is fine, and that makes sense in a certain context, but I don't even realise that I've just got my little Paraga perspective on things, which I then just assume is the right perspective. If I don't then apply wisdom sort of to that, I just assume the way I'm looking at things is the right way. And we just do this. This is natural. It's what the mind does. There's nothing wrong with it. We're born with this way of seeing. We just assume that we are seeing things sort of truthfully. But we have lots of, we just think we're on the whole right, don't we? And this is why we have arguments, wars, difficulties, you name it, because we just assume that we see things right. But we've got so many clues in our present right now experience that show us that we're not seeing things as they really are. So my clue right now is a bit of tension, a bit of nervousness, a bit of a dry mouth, which shows me that, I'm a bit nervous and I've got some investment in not getting this talk wrong, not looking like an idiot, all that sort of thing. So, and you'll all have your own way of, but what that tells me is that I'm to some extent, I have a refuge in, my personality, how I'm coming across, how I want to be seen, how I want you all to sort of perceive me and think, what a great guy and what a talk, that was the highlight. And I hope he comes back and, I'm not far wrong with that, honestly. These are the thoughts that go on in this head of mine. So I don't take it too seriously, but yeah, it is what it is. Right. But, your clues might be thinking, what the hell's this guy on about? This isn't the retreat I thought it was. I didn't sleep well last night. I'm tired. I wish I'd not come. Or even, that guy annoyed me washing up this morning. Why did he have to do that? I only asked him for the washing up liquid and he didn't even say anything. He just slammed it down. Whatever it is, we're constantly getting clues that we're not seeing things as we really are, because we have dissatisfaction, we have dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, which is one of the three, the Buddha laid out, it's very important. The three lakshanas is dissatisfaction. It's very, so it's like we have this wisdom faculty sort of born in with us if we can recognise it. And that is unsatisfactoriness. If we can just notice it, recognise it right now, you've got a clue right there. You don't have to go far to look for difficulty, in your life, just in your present experience. Even if you're in a good state, it's moving, and it can take the tiniest thing for it to go into, if anything like me, into a devilishly nasty state. It can really move very quickly. So yeah, that's this sort of clue that we have, that we're not seeing things the way things are, because we're experiencing, this dukkha, basically. And of course, enlightenment, insight into the nature of reality, is moving beyond this sort of way of seeing, and it's moving into sort of enlightenment and the seeing of things as they truly are. Okay, where the hell are we? And yeah, just to say, wisdom is this letting go, and it's wisdom is a freedom. It has a quality of freedom to it. So if you're wondering if you're developing any level of wisdom, just look for this quality of freedom, any quality of development of ease, of openness in your life, of less attachment to yourself, to your environment, trying to constantly control our environment, trying to let go of this fixed particular view of ourselves and how we're wanting to come across. So noting a quality of wisdom is to notice, even whether it's in meditation or it's right now, just seeing where the tension is, seeing where you can unhook from that, open from that. And again, we've got all these little avenues into wisdom, because we've got all these, huge highways of dukkha going on, but we've constantly got these slip roads from the motorways, or whatever you want to call it, into wisdom, and they're constantly there. But we also have to choose to create them. For a lot of people, not practicing is that those slip roads out of that deluge of dukkha sort of aren't there, because there isn't the path, the practice, the desire to sort of, or the knowing how to move away from them. But as soon as we decide to try and unattach, try to let go, try to just be more mindful, try to bring a bit of energy, try to, recall some of the teachings, try to be true to our experience, then this slip road appears, if that makes sense. Okay. So the question is, how do we develop wisdom? That's no point banging on generally about it. I quite like thinking of the motorway and the slip road. I just came up with that then. But the thing is, it's like, it's like, how do you do it? All these images can be quite nice, but you've got to work out what do we actually do? What do we actually do? A little bit of a barrier that I've found is I found some of the wisdom teachings a bit dry and unapproachable, or even not particularly inspiring. And dare I sort of say it, I suppose I struggle to make a creative, emotional connection with what it is that, even this figure of the Buddha who had gained supreme enlightenment and says, this is what you do, this is how you do it, this is what it looks like. And sometimes that can leave me just a bit dry. If I read, not all the time, but sometimes I'm talking about this because I'm trying to talk about a way into wisdom. So, you might see in the Pali Canon or any of the other sort of stories, you then hear, you hear a list of practices, and then you hear something like, "Thus is one liberated from all taints," and I'm like, okay, what the hell does that mean? That doesn't really mean anything to me. I know what it means on paper, but it's not gone in. And so wisdom from that perspective doesn't work for me. And I think the whole thing with the spiritual factors, or with any of the Dharma life, it's really this quality of the work of the Dharma life is translating what is being said. So for me, that looks like the Buddha communicated, and Bhante had a lot of teachers, but I think Bhante certainly saw himself as a translator of the Dharma, particularly for the sort of, so to speak, for the Western mind, although people don't like using that phrase anymore. So Bhante saw himself as a translator. I think we've got to even translate Bhante and just think, what's he saying? What does he mean here? And particularly in terms of like, this is why the 5 spiritual factors are great, about how do I apply this to my life? Like, what does that actually look like? So if I'm not getting on with the Pali Canon or that presentation of the Dharma, it doesn't mean I'm saying, okay, forget wisdom, it's all looking a bit dry. Because you've got to find your own particular heart connection that is enough to move you forward, to connect you, and mean that you will want to pursue that line of approach. And it's got to be a heart connection, because a heart enough connection, I'll say, because otherwise, it just won't sort of last that long. And not all presentations of wisdom will work for everyone. And again, the thing is, you've got to find your presentation of the Dharma in such a way that you can connect with it and go, oh, that's what it looks like. I can do that. And I've done this personally just by reading Bhante. And I think with Bhante, you've got to read quite broadly and just get this flavour of what he's saying. And I found that when I pick that flavour up, there's a conviction that's started to arise from that. But yeah, I suppose that the work it's finding what is being said in such a way that you feel, yes, that's enough. I've got hold of that thread. There's a strand there. I can feel it between my fingers, and that strand is like moving in the direction of enlightenment. There's lots of these strands about. You've got to be in the right space also to be able to pick them up. But they come in the most bizarre places as well, these sort of strands of wisdom. You can come in the darkest places, the most distracted places. There's always a connection with reality. Wherever you are, whatever's going on, there's always a potential connection with reality and with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, whatever you're doing. Okay, I'm going completely off script here. Right, let's rewind a little bit. So with wisdom, what really helps to identify these threads, what helps you to go from these random kind of teachings and these things that aren't really connected with you, you're not really inspired, what goes from that to getting hold of it? What is it? And this is where faith comes in. So wisdom needs a quality of faith to make you feel you have this desire to sort of move forward. So on this, I'm going to jump into, as much as I was dissing the Pali Canon there, I do like the Pali Canon, by the way. I'm just coming from a certain perspective. Although I can't read too much of it. But anyway. So I'm just going to go into a sutta from the Pali Canon, which for me really, it's quite a well-known sutta. And when I first heard it, it had a massive effect on me. And I just thought, that is what I want to happen to my life. And the sutta is about, it's this beautiful story about, I'm not going to say what it is, and I'll see when you can guess what it is. So it's this beautiful story about an elderly Brahmin who's quite frail and old, and him and a group of his Brahmin mates have gone to see the Buddha to have a bit of, which is what they do back in those days. They go and have a bit of a chat, see what this guy's about. So they go and have a chat with him. So this old chap goes to speak to the Buddha. And from the sutta, you get this absolutely tremendous response of the effect that the Buddha has had on this Brahmin. So this Brahmin's name's Pingir. The sutta is Pingir's praises of the way to the beyond. So you get this absolutely huge sense of heartfelt connection with Pingir and the Buddha. Like absolutely, it's like alive with energy. It's just tremendous. And in Pingir's descriptions of the Buddha, it's phenomenal. We'll have the sutta in the puja tonight. I'll just read a little bit out of it. Just like a bird that has given up the barren woodland and lives now in a forest of abundant fruit, so too I have renounced those of small vision. They call him Buddha, the dispeller of darkness, with all-round vision, who has gone to the end of the world and gone beyond all states of being and becoming. He has no inner poison drives. He is the total end of suffering. This man, Brahman Bharvari, is the man I serve. That's just a little bit of it. And he talks about the fact that because he's old and he's had to return to where he lives, he's then talking about he can't keep going to see the Buddha. But he talks about how after his meeting with the Buddha, he feels completely sort of inseparable from, his heart is inseparable from the Buddha. I cannot move away from Gautama's teaching. My faith and rapture, heart and mindfulness hold me there. Whichever way the one of vast wisdom goes, to that very place I am drawn. Physically, I cannot go there. I am old, feeble, and without strength. But I go there constantly on an imaginal journey, for my heart is joined to him. So, he still just does have a huge effect on me. That sort of connection that Pingir has with the Buddha. And I sort of see, it feels to me like a love story. It feels like a love story. It feels, so to speak, like Pingir has fallen in love with the Buddha. Not in a romantic sense, but in a transcendental sense. He's fallen in love with the Buddha. He's seen this figure. He's just had maybe a couple of conversations. And there's something of the Buddha has resonated so deeply with Pingir that he just can't move away from that. This is possibly this quality that we call anukampa, which is, Sanghas talks about it as it's the Buddha's resonance, the Buddha's enlightenment resonating with the potential for enlightenment in the being that's before him. So it's the Buddha resonating with the potential for enlightenment in others. And others feel that, and that's what awakens this quality in them. That's why people go to see the Buddha, and something is awoken. And then, particularly when the Buddha is communicating, that just grows really. So it's our potentiality for enlightenment. And if I have this as a sort of guide to engage with wisdom and with the goal, then it's incredibly appealing, because I've got so much craving, like you wouldn't believe it. It's ridiculous. It's next level. It's everywhere, and unless I've got a really appealing, vivid sense of the goal, I know what's going to happen, and it's happens in the past. I just lose myself, and I get very sort of chaotic. I'm sort of all over the place. So I've got to have a very vivid, very strong sort of resonance with the goal. A natural one. I don't mean like I must create this strong resonance with the Buddha, otherwise it's going to be difficult. I mean, there is, I suppose, it's that Dharma Chanda, that desire for the Dharma, I suppose, translated. But then, if we're then in a position where we are moving, we have this sense of the Buddha or this sense of the goal, well, we're then left with the question with, well, what do we do with that? What do we do with that connection with the goal? Do we just sort of, so in terms of the 5 spiritual faculties, if we're just going with faith, it's like, do we just sit in faith and go, it was amazing, and just keep repeating what the Buddha said? And because over time, that experience is going to diminish if you have a connection with the goal, connection with truth, with the way things are, with, Sadanandi said last night with, what, I can't remember how you put it, what's most sort of important as a human being, what's sort of deepest. We have to have something to then do to maintain that and to keep moving towards that. And again, this is where the quality of wisdom has to then come in, and it's wisdom as the path to move towards the goal. So then, if you have this, or you have an puja, a connection with something sort of bigger than yourself, the question is, how do I stay in touch with that? How do I deepen that? How do I work with that when I'm at work and it's just difficult? When I just can't be bothered, whatever it is. And again, it's the precepts, it's meditation, it's all these sort of things. But faith is the driving force, which then, so when you go to the Pali Canon or wherever it is, there's that faith underneath it, and that faith that then allows you to translate what is being said. Because if there's no faith there, it is just dry words on a black words on white paper that you might as well use as toilet paper. But with faith, it becomes more than toilet paper. So it becomes something, completely different. I don't know how the toilet paper, let's move on quickly from that image. It then becomes something completely different, because this faith is a lighting. Faith is the sort of, I don't know, it's almost like a puppet show, a shadow puppet show. I don't know if you've seen those where you've got these silhouettes and there's a puppeteer making these amazing sort of shapes. It's almost like the puppeteer and the puppet is faith in a way, but you need the light of wisdom, or whichever way you want to look at it, to actually see what's going on. Okay. So faith is this sort of joyous driving force. It means you really actually want to engage in these, what might appear to be dry teaching, as I need to see the impermanent as impermanent. It's like yawn. But but with faith and with vision, it's like then it becomes something. It becomes this thread that you're then starting to pull, or you're starting to follow it. You're then moving vividly in a direction. Okay. Bing bong bong. I'm just going to talk a little bit more specifically about wisdom. And something that I've sort of found helpful. So we've got this path. So one of the pretty solid Dharma teachings is the threefold path. So we've got ethics, practice of ethics. On the basis of ethics, you can meditate a bit more clearly and a bit more stably and more deeply. From there, you can reflect on the nature of the Dharma. You can reflect on the Buddha. And you can develop wisdom. So we've got this threefold path: ethics, meditation, wisdom. It's nice and clear. It works. All people who've gained any insight into the nature of reality and going for refuge have used this threefold path: ethics, meditation, wisdom. But I think a little bit of a danger nowadays is just sticking with ethics and meditation. If you go into Waterstones, you can look at the spirituality section, or you can look at the sort of productivity section. And there's loads of really interesting books. There's loads of stuff online that are in the arena of ethics and meditation about, how to become more integrated. What else? Just to say, I'm not dissing any of these things at all. I'm not criticising some of these things I might come out with here, but any sort of practices that can help you in your life, just even in terms of, developing loving kindness. You can have books about that aren't necessarily sort of Buddhist. There's a lot of stuff about secular mindfulness, which is, again, it is really important. It is really solid stuff. There's lots of stuff. Slightly wish I'd written a list right now of what things I'm referring to. But if we've not if we're not developing this wisdom aspect, there can be a risk that that we are, we're definitely making a better lives for ourselves, but we're still at risk of unsatisfactoriness just coming in and giving us a good old winding, a good old kidney liver shot, and just knocking us down onto our knees again. It's only with the development of wisdom that something of a more transcendental nature begins to sort of come in, begins to thread in to our life. And you might have had this experience even of, for example, going on retreat. You've gone on retreat, you've had a fantastic retreat. You really feel you've seen something on this retreat, and this is going to change you absolutely and utterly. And you'll never quite go back to your old habits the way you did. And you found something which is true in that experience that feels almost like it's irreversible. It feels like I've had this a few times, this contact of, this is it. I have found the way forward. At home, it can take 5 minutes, 5 hours, whatever it is, before you've got a bit tetchy with your partner, you've got annoyed with someone at the community, you're reacting to you're reacting to someone on the drive home, So, and this is a sort of rhythm that we can have sort of again and again. And yes, there are improvements, obviously. But I'm just looking at this from a certain perspective, so just sort of bear with me. But this sense of you feel something's going to change, absolutely, and you then can find that you're sort of back at a very, very similar place as to where you were before after a while. And you go on retreat again, a similar thing might happen. Or you might not even have a breakthrough like that for quite a while. And these things do stay with you. But it's how to sort of make that difference so that we are, I suppose, making quite real progress, quite sort of definite progress, and how to, what's the little key so that we're practicing wisdom in such a way that it is really transforming us. So the Buddha said that he thought that the key in this regard, which is why wisdom is needed, is to see into the three lakshanas. And particularly, you could say it was him seeing into the view of that we assume this fixed self, this fixed permanent paraganess, is always present. So we can have this sort of experience on retreat, but I'm still assuming after the retreat, Paraga comes back quite vividly, and my set of constructs and security in that regard, just they're sort of welcomed back in a way. So it's how to begin to work in such a way that we see more deeply into, impermanence, emptiness and unsatisfactoriness. So one way of doing this basically is the development of right view. So again, this sounds well dull, doesn't it? Developing view, develop right view. How dull. But I've found this like really, really interesting, because I've had a sense that like Bante's little thing of that we assume we're seeing things correctly and we're not. The reason we assume we're seeing things correctly is we have this network of views around everything. It's what makes us in part. So we've got this vast network of views. If you're anything like me, most of them are wrong. Majority of my views are wrong. There's enough right view in there, I think, for me to keep going for refuge. But there's such a the Buddha describes it as a thicket of views. It's like you can end up sort of trapped in this sort of this great sort of thorny bush of views where you're getting pricked and you torn and you can't quite get out of. So to develop wisdom, it's the really great place to start is to look at what's the lens we're looking through. To do that, that's just an image. To do that is what are the views we've got? What are the views we've got? If I'm not enlightened, if I've not, stream entered or the bodhicitta hasn't risen, I've got a good degree of views which are not in line with the Dharma. So the first thing to do is don't fret, don't panic. With metta, accept that that's the way it is. You're born with that. It's okay. It's okay that we're full of wrong view. In a way, that's not a problem, because that's just the way it is as well, sort of strangely. But, it's what we do that. So we recognize, but we just try and recognize, what are the views that we hold? Are they of the eternalistic views or the more nihilistic? Where is the sort of middle way? What views in contemporary society are really affecting us? And also just trying to have a basic understanding of the basic Dharma teachings of, impermanence, emptiness, unsatisfactoriness, the wheel of life, the 12 links, the spiral path, all these different things. I remember actually Sadhananda saying years ago, and it always struck with me, that some people need a lot of Dharma and some people need a little bit of Dharma. And there's no sort of better or worse in those two. Some people love to study a lot. They love to really go into things. They like this, creating a huge sort of perspective around how the different teachings, that's their way in. That's them pulling at that thread. Others, a bit like myself, don't need very much. Because my mind isn't, it doesn't sort of work like that. So I just need a sort of enough to keep going. I've completely forgot where I was and what I was talking about. Right. Views. Bing, bong, bong. That was it. Yeah, you don't need to go crazy with developing right view. You need to understand what your wrong views are. Try and meditate, study, chat with friends, listen to talks, and get enough of a communication of right view. And look for those points where you've got little threads where you can think, okay, I'm interested in this. And often as well, those interests will lead you to further, deeper interests when you have a connection with a particular approach to the Dharma. Reflect on the basic teachings. Just start with a good, healthy, intellectual understanding of the sort of wisdom basic teachings. Find your wrong views. And work them out at a really basic level so you can then just apply them to your life. There's no good us kind of developing anything in Buddhism unless we're applying it to our lives, because our lives are the our lives are our going for refuge, and we've got to find a way of applying it to our life. And this is a translation. You've got to find that inspiration, that joy to lead forward, so that you will then naturally start to translate it. So again, we've got to. What's really helpful is, when looking at these views, is this inspiration of faith to do that. Because when we start looking at views and start trying to develop right view, we can see that that's a really healthy, basic grounding structure to move towards, any inspiration with joy, sort of we feel in the goal that's coming from faith. So it's to move towards the goal, and it's a sense of, the desire to move that way, and seeing that, these views are the things that are getting in the way of that, in part, and then working with that's how we can move towards the goal. So that's why we need this sort of Pingia's sort of type of response to, we don't need that, that's just a sort of image, this response to the goal, whereby, or faith, however it manifests in you, it can manifest in lots of different ways. I was using Pingia as one example, but faith in such a way that you feel, you really feel you want to move towards it. Just on faith, I'm nearing the end, just so you know. On faith, there's these three qualities of faith that I absolutely love. There's longing faith, which is like we're talking about Pingia. This is this longing faith, this desire to move towards the Buddha, desire to move towards the goal. There's lucid faith, which is a knowing how to do that. You've got hold of that thread. You know what it looks like. You've got a feel for it. You know what steps to take. You know what support you need to do that. And there's confident faith as well, where it's like, this is the way, based on previous experience and based on current fruit of practice from previous experience. And again, with these three, longing, lucid, and confident, it's really good to identify where they are already in your experience. Because all these things, the 5 spiritual faculties, they're already in your experience. It's just where. It's just trying to notice where they are. And that can even be some inner translation in terms of, I didn't realise that this was a quality of faith that I'm connecting with here. So with the three of them, it's about really how to identifying them within your own experience. Bhante goes into them in Know Your Mind, the book Know Your Mind. Okie dokie, to just finish up with, I just hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of the sort of play between the two, and that's just sort of faith and wisdom. But because the 5 spiritual faculties, they've got there's a very dynamic quality to them. That's why they're so helpful, because our life, by its very nature, is dynamic. Our minds are dynamic. So, this is a teaching where it's like we can really work with it. We can, and, for example, with faith, it needs vigor. It needs this desire, this sort of energy, enthusiasm coming in, which it will naturally have. If it is faith, it will have vigor. It will have the joy and the quality and the depth of being able to, decide to sort of engage with meditation. And it will have the mindfulness of, the clarity of being able to just hear the teachings, reflect on them without too much distraction. And mindfulness is a sense, there's lots of qualities of mindfulness. The mindfulness in terms of a sort of sense of purpose as well. So it's got all these, but I just love the 5 in terms of how you can just, you can thread them in wherever you are in that garden or that mandala. you can easily move around and thread them in, and even see, oh well, what's sort of missing here. So if I'm looking at a wisdom teaching and I'm thinking, oh, this just isn't working, but I know it has before, and it might be that it might be just I'm basically distracted. I just need a bit more mindfulness. It might be that there's been a lot going on. I've felt a bit full. My heart is a bit constricted. There's not that quality of faith in terms of that more openness isn't there. So I'm then reading this stuff and it's just not sort of connecting. Or it might be that, you're just tired out. You've had a tiring week. There's not much Bante did talk about in terms of vigour. I'm not going to say that in case Nandi's going to say it tomorrow. But we need a little bit of... obviously, of energy. Yeah. So that's just a bit how the five are working together. That's the end. Thank you very much.